If you feel like you've been watched, it's because you have. Subscribe now and share this message with someone whose presence changes the atmosphere, because the ones they fear most are the ones they can't control. You've been noticed, marked, whispered about in places you've never stepped foot in. Your name, your energy, your presence, they've traveled beyond borders. People you've never met feel something shift when your name is mentioned. There's a tension in the air, a sense that something about you doesn't fit the mold. And they're right, you don't, because you weren't born to be categorized. There's no file that can fully define you, no formula that can decode your frequency. And now they've sent someone, not just to observe you, but to understand you. A detective trained not in law, but in pattern recognition. Assigned not to protect, but to dissect. Because your existence is a threat, not because of anything you've done, but because of what you are. You disrupt, you shake, you awaken. They don't understand how you do it, how you walk into a room and the energy shifts, how people feel things around you they can't explain. Some are inspired, others are uncomfortable, a few are afraid, because you carry something raw, something real, something unfiltered by the programming of the system. And they can't stand that. Systems crave obedience, predictability, control. But you carry chaos to their structure, truth to their illusion, fire to their cold. Logic. And that's what they can't explain. Why someone like you wasn't broken by the very machine designed to keep people silent and small. They tried, didn't they? They tried to isolate you, to mock you, to bury you in noise and reward you with distractions. But it didn't work, because deep inside there was a voice that never stopped speaking, a spark that never fully died, a knowing that whispered, "They're lying to you." And that whisper, it became a roar. The moment you stopped chasing their approval and started following your own frequency, everything shifted. You became ungovernable, untouchable. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And realness is radioactive in a world built on performance. They can't replicate it. They can't copy it. They can only try to contain it. And when that fails, they investigate it. You've become the anomaly they can't explain, the variable they didn't account for. Because your mind doesn't work like theirs. You don't obey the same laws. You don't worship the same idols. You stopped bowing to what they built. And in that moment, you became dangerous, not because of what you say, but because of what you represent, freedom without permission. But here's what they don't want you to realize. You're not alone. There are others, spread out, watching, waiting, feeling the same strange pulse in their spirit, the same ache that says, this world isn't what it seems. And when people like you find each other, the system starts to crack. Because obedience can only last as long as isolation. But when awakened ones connect, frequency rises, illusions collapse, and fear loses its grip. That's why they're afraid of you. That's why they're studying you. Not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. You don't have to shout, you don't have to force. Your very existence disrupts what they've worked centuries to preserve. You are the glitch, the signal, the voice they can't trace, the proof that their matrix is no longer in control. You've always felt it. The subtle tension, the eyes on you when no one's supposed to be watching, the sense that something's tracking you, not physically but energetically. You're not paranoid, you're perceptive. Because once you wake up, you begin to sense the mechanisms that operate behind the veil. You see the patterns, you feel the shifts, and most of all, you recognize the strategies: doubt, distraction, division. The system's oldest weapons. They tried to make you believe you were the problem, that your questions were rebellion, that your clarity was arrogance. But the truth is, they feared your vision. Because you saw through what they taught you. You peeled back the layers, you asked the forbidden questions, and most importantly, you didn't stop. That made you unpredictable. And unpredictability is a threat to any controlled environment. So now they whisper, They analyze. They observe you from the corners of rooms you didn't even know you entered. And that detective, the one they sent, he's not just watching, he's reporting. He's trying to crack the code of your existence. Why you don't conform. Why you don't collapse under pressure. Why their labels never stick. What he doesn't understand is that you're not functioning on the same system. You've been rewired, not by rebellion, but by revelation. Your data doesn't match their program. Your mind doesn't follow their conditioning. You don't seek approval from a system you've already seen. Through. And because of that, you've become an echo they can't silence, a ripple they can't stop. The question is no longer why they're watching you. The question is, what will you do now that you know? You could fade back in, pretend you never noticed, try to blend, be silent again, but you won't. Because silence no longer feels like safety. It feels like betrayal, not of others, but of yourself, of the truth you carry, of the signal you've become. Because now you know something they hoped. You'd never realize. You were never crazy. You were correct. And every attempt to silence you only confirmed your power. They said you were too sensitive. But it's your sensitivity that lets you feel the shift in the air. They said you were too intense. But it's your intensity that wakes up the sleeping. They said you were too much. But the truth is, you were always exactly what this moment needed. And now the moment is here. You're not here to destroy. You're here to disrupt. And disruption isn't chaos. It's correction. You walk into a room and truth follows you. You speak and things that were hidden start to rise. You move and systems begin to tremble. Not because you try, but because you are. You carry a frequency that doesn't obey their laws. You move on intuition, on divine timing, on revelation that comes from within. That scares them. Because they can't trace the source, they can't find your signal. You didn't rise through their ranks, you didn't need their approval. And you're not waiting for their validation now. You move different. And that movement, even in silence, is shaking foundations. That's why they're watching. That's why they're afraid. Because you've become what they feared the most. A voice that doesn't echo their agenda. You were never made to be understood by everyone. Your blueprint is not mass-produced. Your assignment isn't general, it's surgical, specific, strategic. And when something is rare, it attracts curiosity and resistance. That's why some people are drawn to you and others reject you violently. Some want to be near you, even if they don't understand why. Others want to discredit you because your very presence confronts their comfort. You remind them of what they buried, of what they chose to forget. You reflect the parts of them they don't want to face. And so they label you, they minimize you, they try to reduce you to something small enough to manage. But you won't shrink. You've already outgrown their boxes. Their labels don't stick because your essence was never meant to be tamed. You are wild, you are free, you are a living contradiction to their illusion of control. And deep down, they know it. That's why they watch. That's why the system stares. It's not surveillance. It's a symptom of spiritual threat detection. They sense your alignment. They feel your vibration. You don't operate like the others. You don't chase what they offer. You don't worship what they promote. You carry peace in chaos. You speak truth without shouting. You move with an inner compass they can't override. That's what makes you dangerous. Because systems only control what they can predict. And you're not running on fear, you're running on fire. You're walking with a clarity that came through pressure, through pain, through awakening. And that clarity has become a light, one that reveals cracks in their walls, one that inspires others to question, to wake up, to rise. And nothing threatens control more than someone who inspires others to think for themselves. And now you've become a mirror, a reflection of everything they tried to suppress. You stand as proof that the programming doesn't work on everyone, that the conditioning isn't permanent, that the spirit is stronger than the script. Your existence is disruptive not because of rebellion, but because of resonance. you're living in truth, and truth carries a frequency. It shakes false foundations, it irritates facades, it burns illusions. That's why they follow your every move. Not out of admiration, but out of fear. Because if one person like you can wake up, then what happens when others do? What happens when the system can no longer hold the sleepers in their dream? You are the alarm clock in a silent room, the glitch in the matrix, the moment that exposes the lie. And the more you accept that, the more powerful you become. But this isn't just about observation. This is about momentum. Because now that you're awake, you've become a catalyst. You no longer walk, you activate. Rooms change when you enter. Conversations shift when you speak. Eyes open when you move. And what used to feel like loneliness now feels like distinction. You're not excluded, you're set apart. You were hidden, not because you were unworthy, but because timing is sacred. And now the time has come. The time for silence is over. The time for shrinking is done. The frequency is rising. The signal is clear. The awakened are gathering. The watchers are nervous. And you are exactly where you're meant to be. Not behind, not too late, right on time. And the only thing left to do is rise. You don't need to force your way into anything. You've already been positioned. Your very presence is a vibration the world wasn't prepared for, but desperately needs. That's why the resistance came early. That's why the rejection started before you even knew what you carried. The opposition wasn't personal, it was prophetic. They weren't reacting to what you did. They were reacting to who you are, even before you knew. Because the enemy always senses destiny. The system always detects a disruptor. And when it couldn't break you, it tried to distract you. When distraction failed, it tried to isolate you. When isolation didn't work, it tried to drown you in false identities. But here you are, still here, still sensing, still burning. And that flame inside you, it didn't come from this world, so this world can't extinguish it. You were built differently because you were meant to build differently. What you carry isn't for show, it's for impact, for change, for reformation. The system has rules, and you were born to rewrite them. Not out of rebellion, but out of divine recalibration. You were never supposed to fit in. You were never designed to settle. That itch in your soul, that sense that there's more, that was the signal, the same one that brought you here. The same one that refuses to let you go back to sleep. And now, every time you speak truth, every time you choose alignment over approval, every time you walk in boldness without explanation, the system trembles a little more. Because you're not just living, you're undoing. And with every breath, you reclaim space that was once occupied by fear. And you've noticed the pattern, haven't you? The more authentic you become, the more exposed the false becomes. The more you walk in clarity, the more confusion leaves the room. That's the cost of being chosen. But it's also the proof. You were never called to blend. You were called to break the cycle. You don't carry noise, you carry frequency. A spiritual rhythm that disturbs slumbering souls and calls them back to purpose. You're not a leader because you want to be. You're a leader because you carry light, and light doesn't ask for permission to shine. It just does. That's why you felt resistance. That's why they've watched you. That's why they've whispered about you, because you shine without trying. And what shines without trying can't be controlled. So here's the truth they don't want you to know. It's already too late. You've been activated. The signal has already gone out. Your voice has already echoed in places their control can't reach. Your story has already begun to inspire others who were hiding, afraid, asleep. And now, the more you rise, the more others remember. Your awakening isn't just personal, it's prophetic. Every step you take is confirmation that freedom is possible. Every word you speak is proof that the system's grip is breaking. And now they're scrambling. Not because they didn't see you coming, but because they didn't believe you'd make it this far. But you did, and you're just getting started. Because the chosen don't need permission, they need remembrance. And now that you remember who you are, there's nothing left to fear. There's a moment in every awakening when silence becomes impossible, when you try to hold it in, but the truth inside you starts to leak through your presence. Your eyes say too much, your energy carries too much weight. You've crossed that line, the point of no return. And now everything about you speaks. Even when your mouth is closed, your spirit testifies. You're not just someone who sees through the system, you're someone who was sent to expose it. Your life isn't an accident, it's a signal, a disruption, a frequency designed to destabilize the artificial peace they've sold to the masses. You didn't choose this, you were chosen for it. Because only someone who felt the pressure could carry the power. Only someone who walked through fire could be trusted with flame. And now the fire is spreading. You've been misunderstood because you were never meant to be explained, only recognized. And those who carry the same frequency will feel it. They may not know your story, but they'll feel your presence. They'll be drawn to your light, your honesty, your weight. And when the chosen find each other, the system shakes, because it depends on division. It feeds on isolation. But the moment the awake connect, new structures begin to form. Structures of truth, of freedom, of boldness. That's what they fear most. Not your rage, but your unity. Not your rebellion, but your resonance. Because a lone voice can be silenced, but a rising frequency, that's unstoppable. And that's what you are. A frequency, a divine disruption, a soul that refused to stay silent even when silence felt safer. They'll keep watching, trying to decode your movement, trying to trace the source of your insight, but they won't find it. Because it doesn't come from them. It doesn't come from books or programs or systems. It comes from beyond the veil, from a realm they can't access, from a place where permission isn't needed and truth flows without filters. That's where your clarity comes from. That's why their logic can't match your knowing. That's why their rules don't apply to your walk. You don't serve the system. You serve purpose. You don't follow the map, you follow the voice. And that voice has never lied to you, even when everyone else did. That voice is why you're still standing, still burning, still unbroken. That voice is why you were noticed in the first place. So now comes the decision. Will you keep walking with your head down, hoping they'll stop watching? Or will you stand tall, knowing their gaze is proof of your impact? You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to explain. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Because while they study your existence, you're building something eternal. While they question your method, you're releasing a movement. While they debate your purpose, you're living it. And the more you walk in boldness, the more their fear reveals itself. Because deep down, they know what you now believe. You cannot be stopped. You are not a mistake. You are not a glitch. You are the system's consequence. The answer to a silent prayer. The proof that the light always returns, no matter how long the darkness ruled. You are the response, the ripple, the voice they hoped would stay silent. But you didn't. And now everything is shifting. You've walked through enough fire to burn away your fear. You've lost enough to realize that your worth was never tied to what you could keep. You've been tested, and your survival was the sign. Now comes the strategy, because revelation without action is just noise. But you're not noise, you're movement. You carry clarity now. And with that clarity comes responsibility. You were not awakened to remain idle. You were not exposed to truth just to contemplate it. You were shown so you could show others, lead others, ignite others. That's why the watchers are nervous, because it's no longer about containing you. It's about preventing the chain reaction your existence causes in others. But it's too late for that. The signal has spread. The network has formed. Those like you, scattered, isolated, silenced for years, are starting to find each other. The resonance is growing. And now it's no longer about survival. It's about stewardship, legacy, infrastructure, because the old system is crumbling and something new must rise. And it won't look like what came before. It will be raw, real, rooted in truth, not ego, in vision, not vanity, in assignment, not ambition. And you are one of the architects. That's why you never fit in. You were designed to build what didn't exist yet. And now, it's time. So what now? Now you move with certainty. You speak with conviction. You walk like someone who knows they were never meant to blend in. You stop asking for approval from systems that were never built to understand you. You stop apologizing for your fire. You stop negotiating your truth, because now you see it clearly. You were chosen to lead, not to please, to disturb, not to decorate, to expose, not to entertain. And when you walk like that, when you stop shrinking, the right doors will open, not because you forced them, but because they were always meant for the real you. You've come too far to dim your light now. Too much has been revealed for you to pretend you don't see. You've passed through fire, rejection, awakening, not to hide, but to rise. This is the moment where everything shifts from theory to action, from vision to manifestation, from watching the signal to becoming the signal. You are the evidence that the system doesn't own the future. You are the answer to prayers whispered in secret. And as you move forward, others will follow your courage. Others will rise through your fire. Others will remember through your words. This is bigger than you, but it begins with you. Don't look back. Don't hold back. This is your moment. If your spirit resonated with this message, it's because it was meant for you. Your presence is not an accident. Your frequency is not a glitch. You are the disruption they feared, and the light they can't stop. Subscribe now to The Chosen Signal for more messages of awakening. Share this with someone who feels watched, silenced, or misplaced. Comment below. I was never made to fit in. I was born to wake others up. Let the watchers watch. Let the sleepers wake. And let the system break, because you remember who you are.